Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you, man, to another podcast, Equity and Energy. We are super excited to be here with you today. And I am super excited, just like I said on the post, man, to be here with an ecosystem partner and also someone I consider definitely a good friend, Dr. James Guenther. Man, Chairman, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Leroy. And thank OHUB also for this opportunity to chat with you today.
Well, man, you know, it's funny. I think you and I first met like at a couple of different meetups. We kept gravitating towards each other. I came, you know, my nickname for you obviously is the Cat in the Hat. No matter where we go, I can see you somewhere in the building. You're gonna have on the hat. I know exactly where to go find you at, man. So I think it's more of a, you know, it's an honor for us after having spent so much time together over the year to kind of get you on here and kind of talk about some of the things that you're doing and how you're helping to support the ecosystems through Startup Granola.
Sure, I think, you know, again, we've got a lot of things in common with that, with, you know, our goals here, and I think this, you know, again, there's just a lot of different ways to talk about this. One of the things I wanted to mention though is with the hat. Like a lot of people tell me, oh, you know, that's unprofessional, you know, and then a lot of other people at meetings will tell me, you know, well, I remember you because of this.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm a wallflower beyond that.
Yeah.
So I'll actually tell people a lot of times, well, you know, you'll see me, I'm the only one in the place. Everybody else is wearing business suits and I'm wearing a camo hat.
Yes.
And I've been wearing the hat since I was like a first year undergraduate in college. Okay. I had a friend of mine give me one, you know, not this exact one, of course.
Yeah.
I wore it to all of my classes. And so the faculty at the classes knew when I was in class and when I was out of class. And even years later, they you know, when I went up to Southeastern as an undergraduate, and years later, I ran into, you know, faculty that were teaching me, and they're like, "Oh, I remember you."
Yeah,
it's because of that.
And it's a signature item, man. You know, and you know, it's funny until we started talking about the podcast, and I went back and read your bio, man. I think I kind of took for granted that you're Dr. Jim Guenther in the space that you hold, you know, in the innovation, you know, in the innovation area. So I like the fact that I think what the hat for me was something that I can talk to that dude right there. You know what I mean? And I just felt super comfortable. And early on in this process, feeling comfortable with folks was very important. So man, so I really appreciate you kind of helping us get a little, you know, get our feet wet and get grounded in the.
You know, that's one of the important things is being able to you know, that they say a lot of times, you know, reach people where they're at.
Yes.
And I look at it a little different. You know, you've got to be able to talk with people on multiple levels. You know, and that's one of the things that I find interesting is that, you know, when you can shift in conversations from all different levels of conversation, you really start to connect better with people.
Yes.
You know, and you know, it's interesting. One, you know, I was actually speaking to my old professor that trained me up in Tennessee this last week. He retired, and I still talk to him. And I'll tell you, I actually still keep in touch. I've had over the last month, I've had two of my former students contact me about different career decisions,
Nice.
and like mentorship like that is a long term kind of thing. It's not like, or it shouldn't be. It's not like they push you out and say, oh, well, go get a job and do well. They're, like I still talk to my old, mentor,
Mm-hmm.
and he's still giving me advice on things. He also has a really good music playlist. So,
Okay, there you
but,
go. Another connection.
yes, definitely. One of the interesting things that he told me before I graduated, we were sitting down one afternoon, and he said, Jim, your degree does not give you respect.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to use it for respect, you've already completely missed the point.
Mm-hmm.
And where I'm going with this is I've run into so many people in this world that say, oh, well, you will address me as Dr. such and such.
Mm-hmm.
And I always kind of look at that and I'm like, okay, if you need this to validate you, that's one thing. Respect comes from the inside.
Yes.
And it comes from having good interactions with people where you can trust people and they trust you. So so that was some of the best advice that I've gotten throughout my career experience. And I can't tell you how many people say, oh, well, I can interact with you because you're not arrogant, about this or that. And I'm like, oh, not trying to be, arrogant or not arrogant. I don't know. But, when you get caught up in titles, it just gets weird.
Yeah. And I think it really fits our culture perfectly, man. Like there are a lot of people that walk around this city that have a whole lot of, be it intellect or influence.
Yeah.
And you won't know them just based on how they interact and how they hang out and what they dress like, because the goal is for them to kind of, to blend in and enjoy this community, man. I think like for all of us. And I think we do become a better, when we become accessible, we become a better resource to the people around us as well.
Yeah. And on that same note, I had at one of the positions that I was at, I had one of the supervisors tell me, well, you've got to, protect this other person, because they're going to get pushed out of this position because they don't have a doctorate.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and said, I mean, this was crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I said, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, everybody is hung up on if you've got a degree or what degree you have. And I'm like, no. It's what you do and what you can do that matters.
Yeah.
Your degrees don't matter, and your degrees don't truly confer your competency in anything. That's something that you have to demonstrate on a daily basis, and it's kind of like, okay, well, that was good what you did yesterday. Now what can you do today?
Yeah.
So it's strange to me when I see that kind of hang up on things, because I always tell people, look, and I have people all the time, I know we're going to get into SBIRs in a minute, but one of the biggest questions that I get from people that want to apply for these SBIRs or Small Business Innovative Research Awards are, well, do I have to have a doctorate to apply for this?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, absolutely not. That's actually, I guess I'm kind of preempting some of your questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, don't steal my thunder, Jim.
Okay.
I want to use that later on, man. So do me a favor though. Tell everybody how you got to New Orleans. Like, what is your origin story when it comes to the city?
Sure. So I was born here in New Orleans, right over in Gentilly by UNO. Nice. And I still have family that lives there. And I did all of the normal things growing up in New Orleans. In fact, I was telling one of my friends' sons the other day that we used to crab off of the seawall all the time when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I don't, there's very few people you see doing that anymore. And I'm like, I've still got the crab nets at home. So
Yeah.
I'm dying to go out next time the crabs are running to go off the seawall and crab. But I went to Southeastern as an undergraduate.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you that I was a mediocre undergraduate all the way up until the point that they had a class open up in electron microscopy.
Mm.
And the guy that was teaching the class, I went to, because you had to get the instructor's signature to take the class.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that was teaching the class, a guy named Nick Norton, he told me, he said, you only got like a C in my class last semester. And, I only let graduate students in this class, but I need 5 people to make the class go.
Uh-huh.
And so I'll let you in. And it was an eye opener for me in the fact that they taught you how to use the equipment, and they gave you the keys to the lab, and you had a project due at the end of the year, and you could come and go as you please.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, I guess today you really can't do this kind of stuff, but I could go into the lab at 2 o'clock in the morning and work until 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. And nobody would bother me. Nobody would question me. I could come and go as I please. And as long as I got the work done, it didn't matter. And I just fell in love with this. And I'll never forget, he was looking at samples that I was sectioning, and he was like, Jim, this is garbage. This is garbage. This is garbage. And he came across a couple, and he's like, this is really good. Did you do this? And I'm like, yeah, I cut all these. And he's like, okay, why aren't you in graduate school? Mm-hmm. And so that put the bug in me. I applied to graduate school, and I ended up going over to UT Knoxville. And it was interesting because the guy that I ended up working for was a plant biochemist. So we worked on soybean and Arabidopsis and tobacco, basically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I never thought that I would go to work on plants. I thought they were the most boring thing in the whole world when I first started. And after, starting in the lab, the project just became so interesting to me that I loved it. And in fact, I kind of didn't want to leave. But when Katrina hit, I was still up in Knoxville. And I realized then that it was time to come home and help rebuild the city. Yeah. And so I came home. I did a postdoc for, several years over at Tulane. And then I was asked to go over to the community college here and develop the biotech program. Mm-hmm. And I did that for a number of years. And the biotech program changed the way I looked at a lot of things in academia and business. Okay. What I mean by that is I never wanted to go into business or have anything to do with business before I started that program. And part of being in that program was training technicians to go to work for high-end biotech businesses. And all of our businesses here in the city for biotech are really kind of startup companies. Okay. And so I had to learn about the startup culture. And that introduced me to Steve Blank's business model, Canvas, and Lean Launchpad. Okay. And I absolutely, it changed the way I looked at everything when I saw that. Because business model, Canvas, and Lean Launchpad is setting up a series of hypotheses or questions about your business idea, mm-hmm. and going about and generating data to figure out if your business idea is a good idea. Okay. So you're conducting an experiment just like you would in any other science, and it just clicked. And if you've ever come across Steve Blank's like videos or anything, mm-hmm. the way he talks, it just makes everything so clear. Okay. And I'll tell you, I've gotten to meet Steve Blank over the years twice now, and I've interacted with him by email a bunch of times. He's one of the coolest people just in general. He's not one of those people that when you meet him in person, it's like, oh, you're a lot different. He's just as down to earth and as nice as he is in the videos. In fact, one of the things that's really cool is when I was still developing this biotech program, I started, thinking about how to train faculty to think about their business interactions. Because really what you're doing is you're building a product. Your students are a product in that sense. And you want to make sure that those students can go out and get jobs. And so you want to make sure that they're a good fit for those positions. So you go out to the community and you figure out, what do these companies do that I'm training my students for? And this is the problem in education, in general. And this is why I'm not in education anymore, is because education says, we know what's important. And, I've trained you. If you can't get a job, it's just because of you. Mm-hmm. And instead of sitting there and saying, well, wait a second, let's make sure that what we're training our students for is what the job wants. In fact, I'm a huge fan of bringing in adjunct professors that are in the field and having them run the show, because they know what they want when they're hiring. I had faculty all the time telling me, well, I know what's important. And I'm like, you're not hiring these students. How do you know? You say you do, but you're not going out there to the community and finding out.
So you got to this space by actually going out there and finding out. Like you said, in order for you to be of a service to the startup community and working on that workforce part, you had to go and discover what they really needed.
Yes, absolutely. And again, just like any business, all the businesses that you and I work with that are small startup businesses right now, that's one of the first things that I ask people is, well, how do you know that your product is what people want? And sometimes you'll get founders that say, well, I know. And okay, how do you know?
Yeah.
And that's the one of the big differences if a company is going to make it or not. A lot of times, sometimes look, the founder has it dead on, that they have an idea and it's just the perfect fit for the perfect time. Everybody wants it. Most of the time, that's not really the way it works. Most of the time, I've got an idea, and you start going out to the community and finding out, well, they don't really want all of these things, but I want this part of the product. And so then you focus in on that part that people want. And so it's the same way, or it should be the same way in education. You should be constantly going out to that community and interacting with those businesses and saying, okay, well, this is what I'm teaching. Would you hire this person, or is this way off? Are we teaching? And I've actually seen this. Are we teaching something that hasn't been done in the business in 30 years? I had faculty that were teaching how to pour what they call polyacrylamide gels, and I'm like, nobody pours polyacrylamide gels anymore in your businesses. Yeah. It's rare, Most of that's automated now and set up where they buy and purchase pre-made or pre-cast gels. So why spend a semester teaching students that? There's a lot of other things that they need to know, and so it's a real kind of key point here. I guess in every aspect of business development is you've got to know who your customers are, and that's it's something that I just can't stress enough when I work with companies like a lot of times I'll say, well who's your customer, and they'll go, well, my customer's going to be somebody in government. And I'll come back and or they'll get, well, I know my customers. And I'll say, okay, let's call up one of them right now. Call up somebody that right now says, I'm going to buy your product. Yeah. Let's talk to them. And when you can tell me, I've got 10 people on the line that say, I'm going to buy this right now. Is it ready? I'll pay you X amount of dollars for this right now. I want this.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Now you've got something, and you've got my attention.
Yeah.
Because you've got customers that are willing to pay, and they're telling you this. They're like, they're beating down your door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a need for it, and I think you covered some really good things. I think we talked a little bit about product market fit, the importance of getting that right, customer discovery, the importance of getting that right as well. I love working with founders because it's funny. I get caught up in the passion of it, like this energy right now. It reminds me of it's you versus the world, and you're excited about your idea and you love it, and it's in your bones. It's got to work, but there is a way to make your process and your success a little bit more predictable. And I think that's what you was touching on when you talk about Steve Blank's book, man, being able to really vet your concept and vet your idea in such a way that it's not only just a good idea, but it's going to be able to gain some traction as well.
Yeah, and the side of that is you mentioned the idea of passion.
Mm-hmm.
These are your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking to founders, and this is what I really do love about working with founders. So I'll tell you, in academia, a lot of times, any new ideas, as much as academia, talks about, how creative they are and everything,
mm-hmm.
they're nowhere near the level of small business entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And in academia, what you find a lot of times is there's, a small percentage of people that are really creative.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the groundbreakers.
Mm-hmm.
But then you run into a ton of people that just kind of latch on to anything that they can there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, you'll find in academia, a lot of times people become very guarded about their ideas.
Yeah.
Because they're always worried about, people are going to steal my ideas. People are going to steal my ideas. And trust me, I've seen the worst sides of that. And I've been victims of that in academia.
Mm-hmm.
In the small business side, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen in the small business side, but I have a lot of people say, well, I really don't know if I should talk about my idea because I'm worried that somebody's going to take it and steal it. And what I tell people all the time is, that can happen. I'm not going to tell you that never happens or anything like that. But what I've found in the entrepreneur and small business community is that everybody's chasing their own passion, and they're there they'll help you, if you tell them about your ideas and your passion, but they're not there to take it from you, or they're not going to run with your idea because they've already got their own passion that they're chasing.
Yeah.
And so you can be a lot more free about, at least I am a lot more free about my ideas when I'm talking in the entrepreneur community. And, I find that they're there to help you because they've got their own focus, and you can support them and they can support you, but they're not out there looking for your stuff because they've already got theirs. And I love that.
I do, man. I think that you kind of bringing up that point of, okay, that there is we have been able to build a support group, I think, or a support mechanism here. And, and like you said, like not giving so much credence to somebody trying to steal your project, but a lot of times you're talking about it because you're trying to gather the support needed, and just being able to kind of to share it. And maybe somebody has something that maybe has access to something that you don't know about. It's like,
or just mental support, because it's such a depressive or manic depressive, business startup. One day I tell people all the time, working at a small business or small startup, if I was like 20 years old, greatest thing in my whole life.
Right.
Because one day you're like, I'm going to be making millions. This is going to be great. Everything's just going my way.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day you're like, the bottom's just dropped out, that you're like, oh no, what I'm going to do. And I'll tell you that so the company I work at, full time during the day, Mariposa Technology,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I love about the founders of this, and the founders over at Mariposa,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I love about it is when the times that I've sat down with them, I'm like, I think the world's coming to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's incredible to see the way they look at this, because they go, no, this is a problem you're solving. You've just figured out a great problem to solve here. And that's the kind of stuff that separates the, like, I'm going to give up versus I'm going to make it. And so that's one of the things that I've really watched with the two founders that I'm working with,
Mm-hmm.
is that things that normal people would go, this is an issue, this is a problem, they're like, this is great. This is a really big benefit here. And so they know how to turn that momentum around. And it's just amazing how easily they can turn these things around. And it really comes down to mindset. Like I said, a lot of times you're sitting there going, the world's coming down, and the world's not coming down.
Mm-hmm.
It's just your perspective feels that way.
So what would you say are some of the most common pitfalls for new entrepreneurs? And I know in your role as, just as someone who's been supportive and just helping, and then also as the director of Startup Grind,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the things that you see? What's some of the biggest pitfalls you see for founders right now, or new entrepreneurs?
There's classic pitfalls, like you spend a lot of time developing something, and you think that it's going to be the next biggest thing, and you can't, because again it's like a part of you.
It's your baby, yeah.
Baby. And so you can't sit there and listen to somebody saying, I'm not interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I wouldn't buy this. And so you start thinking, and look, there's a couple of ways to look at this. It might be that person that you're trying to sell this idea or concept to
Mm-hmm.
is the wrong buyer.
Yeah.
That you're going after the wrong customer segment there.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to sit there and say, okay, maybe you're not my customer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes founders, they're like, you'll hear this too, I'm sure, all the time. It's like, well, who's going to buy this? Everybody.
Right.
And I'm sure that there are items out there and there are ideas out there that everybody is going to want. But even then, who's your first customer going to be? Who's that beachhead? And so narrow it down. Tell me, on day one, who's going to buy this?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of the problems that you classically run into, is that the founders, they don't want to accept when somebody says, I'm not really interested in this. It's kind of like, well, you just didn't understand this.
Yeah.
You just didn't understand how great my idea is.
Yeah.
And that's true. But that's why you look at, hundreds or thousands of potential customers, and you start segmenting them into these different customer segments. Mm-hmm. And you say, okay, well, this group is not my target, but this group is. So that's definitely one of the things that I see as problems. I think the other thing that you run across again with founders is they get their momentum drained from them because of everyday life just kind of wears them down sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's again why it's so important to have people around you that can say, yeah, I went through this, and this is how I handled it. A lot of times you'll find a founder that's beating their head against the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and it for me, sometimes it's like, well, I don't know how to help you with this, but I know who has gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
Let me introduce you to. And you'll find that the person that's gone through this and has already found their way out of this problem can say, this is all you need to do. And
Yes.
literally just that little bit of help, it turns the whole world around.
Yeah. And, Jim, I mean, and we kind of do this on a small level. Most of the time, it'd be me and you, or we'll invite somebody else in.
Mhm.
That whole think tank concept, I think, is really important, man. Being able to get a founder with their project, even their challenges, and then have a group of people around. And then as we're going through the business and the challenges, everybody kind of has an opportunity to give input on how do we get past that. Now,
Yeah.
I'll be completely honest. I saw this first. Kwame Adu and Corridor Ventures
Mm-hmm.
did just a really nice, whiteboard session when the founder teased out some of the challenges that they were facing, and then gave them a to-do list to go and
Mm-hmm.
work on. And I think that that's something that definitely something that you and I do. I think that's something we should do more as an ecosystem as a whole, too, man.
Yeah,
Now,
I definitely, there's a couple of things that I think being able to have sessions like that with founders is critical for them.
yeah,
And again, it part of it's just part of it's just showing up.
yeah,
I'll keep coming back to Steve Blank on this a
yeah.
lot of times, but one of the things that I really love, he's got a short 1.5-minute video online,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about entrepreneurs making their own luck.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, look, the best entrepreneurs that you find out there, they'll tell you, I was just lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that, and I'm paraphrasing him in this, the reality is that those people showed up more than everybody else. When everybody else said, that's too much work, I don't feel like doing this after 5 o'clock, I just don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
Those entrepreneurs were the ones that showed up. They do that over time, and they make their own luck. And they'll tell you, I was just lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, and I met this person, and we just put on a napkin our business idea, and it became $1 million idea. That's not really the truth. They see it that way, but the reality is they make their own luck with this. And so a big part of this is just, when you don't feel like it, showing up and trying to do something with that, to push those things forward. Everybody gets those days where they go, I'd just rather stay in bed today.
Yeah.
But, forcing yourself to do that, that's kind of a key point. And again, sometimes you just have to sit down and say, well, why don't we meet up? I don't really feel like it right now, but I know that this is going to be a positive thing in the long run.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about doing, sessions like that, I think that's a great idea. The other one that I really like, and I've seen this over at a couple of places here, like Scale did this about a year or so ago, is that they'll put out like a night, like crazy idea challenge.
Okay.
And so they'll put out, something like the one that I went to was actually on an SBIR for dealing with the dead zone out in the Gulf of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a couple of people came in, told us about what the dead zone was, what makes it. And they said, let's hear your craziest off the wall ideas. And that kind of stuff is really fun. It's because it brings out the creativity side in people. And, when you tell people, look, I don't care how nuts it sounds. It's supposed to sound nuts at this point.
Right.
it becomes fun because a lot of people, say, well, I don't want to, sound like I'm, have a dumb idea. And it's like, no, this is supposed to be your crazy nuts ideas. So it takes away that kind of inhibition. I definitely, while we're talking about that, I want to do some of those with y'all.
Yeah, man. Definitely. I think the giving founders to not feel like they're under pressure and just really sitting there and just vibing about their business and other people putting in input. I think that's a relief for them as well.
Yeah,
Now,
but it shows people are interested.
mhm.
It shows that you're not working in a vacuum, and that there are people that are interested in what you're doing.
Mhm.
And, and some of them, they might not even have the skills to help you, but they want to help.
Mhm.
There's a lot of times that founders will come up to me and ask me something, and I'll go, I don't know anything about this.
Mhm.
This is not my skill set, but I know I can call up you, or I could call up, like I called up Vic Johnson over at Louisiana Technology Transfer the other day about something, and Vic was like, oh, well, here, I mean, there's a lot of people out there, and again, I'll mention this because this is one of the things that one of our co-founders that I work for, John Roberts, told me, and I think this is critical. And it's never underestimate the importance of your network.
Yes.
It took me years to learn that. The professor that trained me was not a networking person,
Mhm.
and I think the reason why is he was absolutely frighteningly brilliant. So he could train himself to do almost anything that he wanted in this world. So he didn't really need to rely on anybody else.
Mhm.
But normal people, your network allows you to take your skills, and it's like fitting together a jigsaw puzzle.
Mhm.
What are those people with these other skills? How do they fit together? And how do they develop something novel by fitting together? And that's the fun part. I'm really bad about solving. I can't solve a Rubik's Cube or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I can, talk with people, and I can sit down and figure out how their skill sets mesh together
Mhm.
to make some really novel things.
Well, I think this is a really good segue too, because when it comes to SBIR, I think that we have some of the sharpest cats, like between Vic Johnson and Hush McClendon,
Yeah.
and then just what you do here. I feel like I always have a pretty solid group of folks to lean on when it comes to getting more information about SBIR. But I would like to kind of take the audience through this process, because everybody thinks that, hey man, let's just get an SBIR, and I know it's a lot more complicated than just getting an SBIR.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to kick it off and just kind of like, so what's some of the primary criteria that the SBIR reviewers are looking for when evaluating these proposals?
Sure. Let me back up a little bit with that.
Mm-hmm.
So SBIRs are Small Business Innovative Research Awards,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a sister program to that called STTRs that are similar, and those are Technology Transfer Awards.
Okay.
I'm not going to talk really about STTRs. I'll mention a little bit about them in a minute. But so what they are is there's 12 government agencies, and that's including the Small Business Administration,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of oversees everything. But there's 11 true government agencies that produce or have requests for SBIRs.
Okay.
And so these are government agencies with over $100 million, federal agencies, over $100 million budget every year. And there's a couple of other criteria, but they have to put some of their budget into small business development.
Okay.
And so typically they define that using the general SBA criteria of, having under 500 employees. You can go and look at up all the direct criteria.
Mm-hmm.
But for these agencies, and each agency has a different flavor. And so, like if you're dealing with Department of Health and Human Services, They're going to be really different in the way you work to put together a small business innovative research grant for one of those awards from something like Department of Defense.
Okay.
So they're all the same. They all have the same name. And so this leads me to one of the things that I get from, founders a lot of times, like, can't we just write one grant for my idea and send it off to a whole bunch of places?
Okay.
And you might be able to, find 2 or 3 different places that have similar things they're looking for and custom tailor your idea to each one of them. But you're never going to be able to send off one as like, throw it at the wall and see what happens. It's a horrible idea to me. And I've worked with, people in grant writing before that say, well, let's just write one grant and send it out to everybody. And I'm like, well, you don't even know the criteria on this place, and this place, what they're looking for, which is going to be different. Again, it's like looking at 5 different customers and saying, I'm just going to shotgun everybody wants this. It's like, no.
So you're thinking, so you're saying it's super important that small business needs to have a really good idea of what that agency
wants.
Okay.
Yes.
And then they pick the partner based on the people who can best provide the resources to help fulfill what the agency wants.
Yeah, you have to make sure that it matches up. That's the way I look at it. Now, there are some agencies like National Science Foundation that are kind of a catch-all. And what National Science Foundation does is you would send them basically it's similar to a letter of intent. They call it a pitch proposal.
Okay.
And they'll read anything you send in like that. And then they'll come back and they'll say, we think this is a really great idea. And the term that everybody uses is innovative.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at SBIRs, again, so let me still back up one more step. So the first stage of an SBIR for the federal level is called a phase 1. Louisiana actually has a phase 0, which helps you in writing the grant. Okay. And so your phase 0, Louisiana will actually, pay to help you write that grant.
Okay, so that comes directly from the state of Louisiana, those resources?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that comes through the state. That's again going to be Hutch and Vic that are really the people to talk to there. Okay. But it's a way of incentivizing small business development here in the state of Louisiana.
Okay.
So, but they call that a phase 0. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about it because your phase 1 is your proposal that deals with proof of concept. I have a great idea for a new coating on a naval vessel that's going to reduce friction in the water by 50%. Okay. I don't know if that's going to work. I've got an idea for it. I've got maybe some data that tests it, but I need money to see if this is actually going to work. And, you come across a request for proposal from the Navy under Department of Defense that's looking for something like that, let's say, coatings that do certain things, reduce radar signature or reduce drag in the water or reduce corrosion. They produce these, requests every year, basically, from these agencies. And some agencies have open requests. There's a lot of different agencies with different timelines for their requests. Okay. But the idea is that you match up your idea with an agency, and then you would produce a proposal, and it's a grant proposal that you would write saying, I want to test this concept. This is how I'm going to go and test the concept. And this is going to be my criteria to say if it's working or not. So you put together a full proposal, you send it in. If it's funded and it depends on the agency. Again, some agencies are about $100,000 that they'll fund for a phase one, all the way up to I think 350 is about the top for a phase one.
Okay.
And they're typically projects that would take 6 months to a year to complete, and they're designed to give you a rapid, yes or no answer. Is this idea going to work? Now, with this, the term they use all the time is that this is a way of de-risking high risk, high reward technology is what they're looking for. So they're looking for something that's innovative and going to change the world. And so if you just have a really kind of moderate, change in technology, if you've got a light bulb and I'm going to make a smaller light bulb, probably not going to fit in that category.
Okay.
But if you have a light bulb and you say, now I've got an idea for an LED that's going to, that's a completely new concept. That's, so think about that with the idea of innovative.
Mm-hmm.
That how is, and that's what they'll tell you a lot of times. How is this idea innovative? How is this going to change? It's not an incremental step in new technology. It's going to be groundbreaking. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of stuff that they're looking for.
So
go ahead. I'm sorry. I keep going. I could go on and on about this for hours.
No, you're good. There's just certain spots I'm trying to hit. So it sounds like you're talking about companies that were, even if they're really in ideation phase, like you said, it's just a good idea. They can actually apply to see if the SBIR would fund the testing of the idea.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that a person doesn't have to have a lot of preliminary data when they start working on the SBIR process.
No, you don't have to have a lot of preliminary data usually, but you do have to have at least, something that's something, I think if you just go in there with a, completely new, hey, I'm coming up with a compound, and I don't even know if we can synthesize this compound. I don't even know if it's going to, have any of the properties that I'm claiming. You're going to have to show at least some connections there in evidence.
Okay.
It's squishy there, because if you've got something that's tested and it works, then you're beyond that phase one.
Oh, and you might not.
You're beyond that. Now, some of the agencies will have things like fast track, okay, or a combination phase one, phase two, that deals with your technology. It works, and you can go to commercialization, which is typically really what phase two is about. It's your commercialization of this, because the government, they may want to use this technology, but they also want to make sure that you're able to sell this technology to private industry, or to retool it for other markets. And so they're going to ask you things like that. So if it's just typically for the government, they're that you're typically looking for things that you can sell to the government as an idea, and then also sell to private industry. One of the ones I read about years and years ago was they had an SBIR, and this was for helicopters landing in the desert, that they were kicking up a lot of sand. Mm-hmm. And so they were asking for a way to fix that problem.
Okay.
And they had a company that came out with a mat that you would lay down that was porous to the sand, and so the sand would always go through that mat.
Right.
And so they sold it to Department of Defense, but then they also turned around and they made beach towels or beach mats out of it for beachgoers. So they also had a plan for private use of that technology.
Okay.
So there's always things like that, and the interesting thing is it's truly like crazy how many different things that they're asking for out there.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine about 2 years ago that's a private does aquariums,
Okay.
saltwater. He's got a big, huge, beautiful saltwater aquarium. And I was talking to him about this, and he said, "Well, do they have anything for like saltwater, like corals?" And I was sitting there going, "Coral? What would anybody in the government want with coral?
Artificial coral. Yeah.
And so, but I looked, and they actually had three SBIRs out there. One
Right.
of them was for basically making coral stem cells. And
Okay.
I still wish that I would have wrote an SBIR for that, because I think I've got a decent idea for that. Then they had another one for making a type of glue that you could glue the coral back to, rock there. It was a bio or eco-friendly glue. And then the third was a new type of sunscreen that they were looking for that didn't harm corals.
Okay.
So,
Oh, yeah, when the
yeah,
crystals in the water. Why?
yeah.
Why? I didn't think about that. Okay.
So, my point is that ideas that you may sit there and go, oh, I don't have any ideas in my head that's high tech or anything like that, that you would absolutely be surprised. And leading into that, again, I find that the best people to work with are a lot of times non-PhDs.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times the PhDs will get very caught up in the real high-end technical aspects of the grant writing, and they'll miss, where is the commercialization side of this?
Yeah.
PhDs a lot of times they're geared towards basic research that's for just the knowledge of how does this work.
Yeah.
And not the commercial side of this. How are we going to take this technology and what are we going to do with it? And so both of those things are important. Basic research is absolutely the foundation, but in these situations, you have to kind of think about, well, what am I going to do with that basic research? How am I going to turn it into a product?
So a collaboration with that academic institution and the small business, and you're saying like you're talking like working with PhDs, and a lot of times that's about like just continue to work on the problem versus hey man, how does this make money? Transitioning quickly into how do we make money? How important is that collaboration with the academic institution in strengthening the SBIR proposal itself?
So there's a lot of ways, and I've got a personal opinion on this that I'll share here.
Okay.
And so if you're at an academic institution, so if I'm a graduate student or a professor at an academic institution, I would go in for what they call the STTR that I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
And that's a technology transfer. And because that's really made for working with those academic or government labs.
Okay.
They're set up that you have to do a specific amount of effort at a particular lab that's basically like a sub award.
Okay. That's more SBR versus SBR.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a couple more caveats to it, of course. I'm really simplifying. But if I'm just a small business or a person that has a small business idea,
mm-hmm.
I typically, unless they have a really good relationship with a university,
mm-hmm.
I typically will say, let's find a lab that we're going to work with and go in as an SBIR. Mm-hmm. Or you can work with a university, but let's go in as an SBIR for that, not the STTR, because I think that gives you a little more flexibility that if the relationship sours for one reason or another, you can then switch over to somebody else. They're not sub-awarded on your contract.
So the SBIR, they're not sub-awarded.
Right.
STTR, they are actually sub-awarded on your contract. So that's a relationship. That's a marriage right there.
Yeah, you're married there.
SBIR, you just dating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in fact, Leroy, this is one of the things that I've thought about for a long time, and this is kind of my passion and what brought me into this.
Mm-hmm.
When I was teaching at this community college, they would tell the students all the time, like, if you go through this biotech program, you can get a good job as, a middle class, you can become middle class.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at that and going, you talk about a glass ceiling with people, that's that's a glass ceiling,
Mm-hmm.
that you're telling them, well, you could be middle class, that's the best you're ever going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would bring this up, they would say, oh, no, that's not what we mean. I'm like, well, that's exactly what you're saying. And so I started thinking about, how do you actually, go beyond middle class? And entrepreneurship was one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I've been, playing with in the back of my mind for years and years now was actually going into the technical and community college systems across the country,
Mm-hmm.
and having small businesses go in and partner with them for that research side of things, and contracting out with those small, technical and community colleges to do that.
Okay.
And, if you go to the big universities, all of them have a technology transfer department.
Mm-hmm.
All of them are familiar with STTRs. There's a ton of really great projects that have been spun out of every university here in the state.
Okay.
And I could name tons and tons to you, but I'd still be forgetting a ton of people
Mm-hmm.
that have put out some great businesses and been so successful with that. If you go to a community or technical college, it's completely gone, and there's nothing there. And your community and technical colleges, by definition, they're, your community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't understand why they are not promoting these type of small business development opportunities at those community and technical colleges, because, again, your small business development, your small businesses, they drive so many aspects of our entire community.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't understand that. And so this is one of the things I've been, very, very passionate about, and thinking about how to really put this together for a long time, is how do you change that and start bringing in that concept of starting your high-tech businesses at community and technical colleges. You go to a community technical college, they're going to talk to you, they have a business department, and they're going to talk to you about, how to do a bake sale.
Right.
But they are not going to talk to you typically, there are exceptions to this, about how to develop, the next, chip, circuit board,
Mm-hmm.
or the next, electronic chip development, or, anything on that level. They're not really, set up for that.
Mm-hmm.
But they could be very easily, because there are people that have those skills, and there's businesses that want to come in and work with you and do that.
Well, there was a time in this country when your greatest innovation came from a lot of these people were uneducated.
Yeah.
So talking about the Henry Fords, and
Yeah.
these are not people who have full blown college degrees, man. These are like just these people they had really good ideas, they stuck to it. Been going back through Think and Grow Rich, man. Just really listening to the number of people who didn't necessarily have that education. They had opportunities, but they didn't have that education.
Right.
We're getting close.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the end of it, man. So what I really want to do is, what are some of the resources or support systems do you recommend for small businesses looking to navigate the SBI process?
So the easiest thing is to go straight to sbir.gov.
Mm-hmm.
But here in Louisiana, I would definitely go talk with Louisiana Technology Transfer, LED, Louisiana Economic Development, and of course, Vic Johnson and Hutch McClinton over there.
Right. And we try to not send them everybody. We are a filter to a certain degree. But if we take, the questions and different things that folks have, and Vic and Hutch they've been really good about answering
Yeah.
those questions and getting you positioned, to kind of have that conversation with them. And I love that. I love that about them, man. And it's funny because inside this ecosystem, like I said, we have had the opportunity to share information, share contacts, and then also work with founders together. And I think one of the things that I always say is community is our superpower, and we're now at that phase now where we're sharing the same contacts and the same information. So I think that makes it helpful as well. I'm going to check to see if we have any questions in the comments.
Okay. While you're doing that, I just want to give a little quick shout out, Startup Grind.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention one of the great things about Startup Grind is I get to interact, and the people in our community here get to interact with all of the chapters of 600 plus around the entire globe. Yeah. I've got several things already that I'm co-sponsoring or co-hosting this year or this month. Nashville, we're doing with Nashville's chapter, Hire Your Kid Camp. In Egypt, Shaban El Kom, that's SG Women's Month is this month. We're doing product marketing strategies for founders. Completing your business plan, we're doing with Nashville. And then finally, this is a really cool one. It's a combination between Hong Kong and Eldoret, Kenya, two chapters that, and we're co-hosting it. And it's Africa's AI Opportunities with Larynx Ocean, who's the chapter director over in Eldoret, Kenya. And he is a cool guy. Okay. If you get a chance, jump on those calls. It's so neat to hear the different ways that people approach entrepreneurship around the entire globe. And that's, that's one of the things that I love about Startup Grind. And that's one of the things I think Startup Grind can do to enhance our community is bringing in a more of a global aspect.
How will events and will we be able to say get information to where we can actually share it with our group, everybody who listen to?
Sure. If you just go online and type in Startup Grind New Orleans, you'll come straight to our chapter link there. I can also put in the chat or wherever you want contact information there. If you want to add that in like afterwards, or I don't know where you want to put it at, but I can add that in, or anybody, you can just send them my way if they want more information.
And generally, we probably definitely will do that. I think that the first thing we're going to do is get you get all the information that you want to share. Have it attached to this.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there.
Okay. Last thing is, any of our founders interested in joining HubSpot, we've got a special that we're working with HubSpot this month, and it's up to 75% off and a lot of other bonus features with HubSpot. So I've got that posted on our websites also. And anybody interested, they can just contact me and I'll send them the codes for it.
Yeah, man. And so what's really cool about this is that, like you said, that this playback, we're going to have information there. So make sure we coordinate on the information that you want there. And then we will also send out in our newsletter, we'll share this podcast and give them access to your website as well.
Cool.
All right. I hope you can hear me good. It looks like I'm getting slow over here.
I can. I think, yeah, we're up on our time though, huh?
We're up on our time, man. Thank you so much for coming by and sharing a little bit about the SBIR. I'm going to just kind of watch the replays and different things like that. We may get a chance to jump back on and maybe give people a little bit more insight on it.
Anytime.
Again, yeah, man, because it's just one of those things where everybody goes like, let's just do an SBIR. And I don't know if they realize how involved it really is. Like
it's not, people say, oh, it's free money. And it's like, no, it's not free money really,
It's a work associated, but we have a great team though.
Yeah, and I'm happy to anybody that wants to talk with me about SBIRs in general, or I do consulting work for SBIR development also. So happy to talk with them about that.
That's cool, man. I think we should also at some point fall back and kind of talk about the other companies we're working with, but not right now.
Yeah,
But I want to give people more of a better picture of how we kind of operate as an ecosystem, how we share everything.
yeah.
Like I said, at this point we are a little bit over our time, man. But we definitely want to thank Dr. Jim Guenther for joining us today. The Cat in the Hat always has great information, and so we appreciate that. And for all those who had the opportunity to come and be on the show, come and listen to us, man, we definitely appreciate you as well. Um, Super excited about our next podcast because we're going to have an actual speaker from the United States Patent and Transfer Office. So it's going to be more information that all of our founders need. So again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Thank you, my friend Leroy. Talk to you soon.